Hello, friends. This is John Finnegan here today with Monica Levin. And Monica is the CEO of a company called Nonverbal Science, which facilitates self-discovery through body language, mindset, and intuition training. And so, what an important topic today, this one of communication, because this last year during the pandemic has forced us all to be online. And so, Monica, thanks for being here, first of all.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. I love talking about communication. Actually, I love talking about self-discovery because self-discovery is what we're all here on the planet to do because everybody wants to be happy. But what does it mean to be happy?
Right.
We have to discover things about ourselves to see, are we getting in the way of our own happiness? Are we getting in the way of our own connection with other people? Are we getting in the way from our own connection with ourselves? Which
Right.
is why I've chosen to talk about body language, which
Mhm.
is nonverbal communication through the body,
Yes.
mindset, which is the thoughts we have for ourselves, as well as intuition, which is how to connect to that deep part of you to know what is true for you. And they're all components of self-discovery.
Right.
How can I be happy? Because no matter what anybody wants in their lives, it's because they think they're going to be happier if they have it.
Mhm.
If I want more money, it's because I think I'm going to be happier when I have it.
Right.
If I want certain clothes, any material thing, I think it's because I'm going to be happier. If I want to interact with people, I want to do it because I think it'll make me happy. So
Mhm.
everything we desire is innately because we want to thrive and be happy. But sometimes we get in our own way.
You've said a lot, and I look forward to unpacking that with you during the course of this conversation. You're coming to us from Detroit right now. Are you from Detroit originally?
No, I have lived in the United States, gosh, 27 years, but I grew up in Canada. Uh, my elementary school and high school were in Montreal.
Mhm.
And talking about self-discovery, being a teenager is really tough. I mean, being an adult is tough.
Yes.
But how do we even know what we want or don't want in our lives? We're trying to meet other people's expectations all the time. So we're leading lives that are outward focused. If I choose this route, maybe I'll get approval. If I choose that route, maybe I'll get approval. I remember I had this interview at the Royal Bank of Canada for a summer job. And the HR person, she says, Monica, we're going to hire you. She says, you have a choice of two jobs. The first job is to be a teller for the summer, and the second job is to work in the cafeteria. And I had been cooking and baking since I was 4 years old. Okay, so I remember standing on a stool to cook. And so I said to her, I want the cafeteria job. And she says, don't take the cafeteria job. You're too smart for a cafeteria. Take the teller. And I felt shame. And I said, all right, I'll take the teller. So that's a memory of me not honoring
Mhm.
what I wanted, being led by what people on the outside said. And then I went to Ontario to university, and that's another story of being led by the outside. Instead of trying to get approval, it was more of a rebellion because I was born 1963, 1970. It was all about equal rights and racial equality, which is human rights and human equality. So when people said things that were contrary to that, I was, a rebel. So
Mhm.
people told me, you can't be an engineer because you're a woman. So I
Mhm.
said, well, then I'm going to be an engineer. So I went to Ontario for school to become an engineer. I didn't even know what it was. And I did not like it.
Mhm.
But I finished my engineering degree. And then I knew in my heart that I always wanted to be a teacher. And I still am a teacher, just in a different format.
Mhm.
So I became a high school math and physics teacher.
When you graduated with that degree in civil engineering.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I
And
got married.
where were you teaching?
I taught in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
It was the late 80s. There really weren't many jobs. So I had managed to get a position for maternity leave, which in Canada is a minimum of 6 months maternity leave.
Hmm.
So I taught for half a year, and then I taught summer school. And then in the fall, I actually went back to the University of Waterloo, and I became a teaching assistant for their first year engineering students.
Oh, okay.
And eventually we ended up in the States.
Hmm.
And when my husband and I split up, I was thinking, what am I passionate about? So I became a holistic nutritionist, a healer, a spiritual counselor. So that was really more in tune with who I am.
Hmm.
But the question is always, how do we find our way? Can
Hmm.
be outward focused, and then, you go to university like me, you get a civil engineering degree, and 4.5 years later, you say, wow, I'm not following what's true to me.
Right.
Or do you tune in sooner,
Hmm.
we hope, to follow what feels right?
Hmm.
And I think it's a process. Self-discovery is a process. A little bit at a time, we know more and more about ourselves. That's why we say, gosh, I wish I was 20, but with the wisdom of what I have now.
Sure.
So I could jump higher and run faster, but at least I would feel better emotionally in my own body.
Right. And so that's how you ended up in Detroit.
Yes, yes. I'm outside of Detroit, so I'm not downtown.
Sure.
But yes, in the greater Detroit area. It's a large area.
Hmm. Yeah. And so um, that inspired you to write a book,
Yeah.
and you've got a website for your book as well. Inner Guidance Communication Coaching is what I see on that website. Can you talk a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write it?
Okay, I'm reaching over to get it. Here we go. So I wrote the book called The Body Soul Bridge
Hmm.
because in 2012, I had been invited to work for a company as a sales representative. And I thought, wow, this will be great. And I'd always worked for myself. And I thought it would be nice to have colleagues. It would be nice to have a salary and benefits. I want to know what it's like.
Hmm.
So I worked for them for 6 years. And by the end, I was miserable because I wasn't following what was really true to me.
Right.
So when I quit, I thought, well, what can I do? I thought body language, mindset, and intuition.
Hmm.
But I hadn't had a vacation probably ever. I raised my 3 kids by myself. Was always working and then working in sales. So my sister said, Monica, why don't you take a few months off? So I did. And actually, you're in Colorado, right?
Yes.
I came to Boulder 3 times in the span of a few months. Fantastic place. I loved it. But by the end, every morning when I woke up, I would hear in my head, write the book.
Hmm.
Write the book. What are you talking about? So in The Body Soul Bridge, I wrote about the techniques that I've been teaching clients for more than 20 years,
Hmm.
which is how to access that part of you that knows answers to everything.
Yes.
My journey, I started because of my health. And a woman in Ontario, I would say, saved my life
Hmm.
because she did what's called muscle testing
Hmm.
or applied kinesiology for food intolerances. So I became a food intolerance expert. Actually, before this, I wrote 3 recipe books, but people don't use recipe books anymore. Everyone searches online. But I teach you how to connect to that part of you that knows answers and how to determine what foods to eat or not eat, what supplements to take or not take,
Hmm.
how to transform your thoughts around things so that you can bring more happiness into your lives. And there's a whole section on body language,
Hmm.
because once you've claimed the brilliance of who you are, how do you relate that to the world? How do you convey that to the world?
Hmm.
Because we get into really, really bad habits with our body language. So our bodies say something different than our words.
Hmm.
And science has shown that when we communicate, only as little as 7% of our communication is verbal, and up to 93% is nonverbal.
Hmm.
Like one time I was crossing the border from Michigan into Ontario, and I get to the border guard, and they always ask question number 1, which is, where do you live? I think, well, she's holding my passport. I wonder why they ask that. Well,
Mhm.
now I know it's called a baselining question. They want to see what you look like when you're telling the truth.
Mhm.
And the second question when you go into Canada is, do you have any cigarettes, alcohol, guns, and pepper spray? So as she's asking me, she says, do you have any cigarettes? I'm like nodding encouragingly. Alcohol, guns, and pepper spray. And I said, no, I don't. What would you think if you were the border guard?
Yeah.
I had been unaware that I was doing this. This is before I learned body language. She
Mhm.
looked at me, she says, no, you don't, or no, you don't. I said, oh my goodness, I should know this. She says, let me ask you again. I thought I'd have to put a vice grip on my head to
Sure.
stop it from moving.
Right.
Do you have any cigarettes, alcohol, guns, and pepper spray? No, I don't.
Mhm.
So as we become aware of what our bodies are saying, we can be more intentional about our body language so that we can better communicate with others.
Mhm.
And then once we're aware of other people's body language, we can understand them better and improve our relationships with them.
Right. So now you use this as an opportunity to teach body language and communication in the business world. What have you discovered so far?
What have I discovered?
In other words, do you feel like we've made progress over time, or do you think that we're still kind of wrapped up in the past, that we aren't connected to what's going on subconsciously with our minds and our bodies? Have, have you discovered that we've made progress, or that we're sort of still stuck in many ways?
That's a good question. I feel that it's about universal timing, so to speak. So
Mhm.
I think that consciousness is ready for this. We have seen a lot of movements to try where people are trying to figure things out.
Mhm.
In corporations, they're having a lot of conversations around unconscious biases.
Mhm.
So corporations and people in general are looking at themselves and trying to discover what's true for them and not.
Mhm.
We talk about unconscious bias in terms of race, unconscious bias in terms of sexuality,
Mhm.
unconscious bias with regard to gender, unconscious bias regard to age. There's
Mhm.
ageism, right?
Right.
And there's also unconscious bias with our body language,
Mhm.
because the part of the brain that interprets body language or nonverbal communication is a different part of the brain that processes verbal communication,
Right.
and it's unconscious. I always say it's like the part of me that's back in a cave in cave person days,
Right.
sitting there worried that you're going to come in, hit me on the head, and steal my fire and my food.
Mhm.
That's the part that is interpreting nonverbal communication.
Mhm.
And when I teach people, they love knowing that,
Right.
because everybody wants to know more about themselves.
Right.
I mean, I'm the only one living in this head. No one else lives in here, and I want to be as happy as I can inside here. So the more I understand myself, the happier I become.
Yeah. Well, you caught me at a good time, because I just started reading Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And you and I had talked about the work of Nancy Duarte and her firm, and the book, I think it's called Persuasion, that I think has really inspired a lot of people. And I think all of this comes together. But after we've captured it on our LinkedIn profile, after we've captured it on our website or written it in a book, that which we do for a living, then we still need to communicate it as individuals. We've got to inspire others if we're going to change the world. And I think that's where your work comes in.
Yes, because I feel that, uh, what is it from Hamlet? To thine own self be true.
Yes.
And it goes on. I don't remember exactly the quote. I was actually just looking at it this morning from Hamlet. Essentially, it says, be to thine own self be true. And just like night follows day, I don't remember how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, if you are true to yourself,
Right.
there's no way you can hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
The only time we hurt people is when we are in so much pain
Mm-hmm.
that if I'm in so much pain that my desire to be happy means that I'm going to be nasty to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's still my desire to be happy. I might be in so much pain and I feel suppressed and squashed and beaten down. And so rebelling feels like it's a step toward happiness. And it's sad, but that's, I think, how this chain of pain continues. But if we can stop ourselves before we're nasty and say, wow, okay, feels better to feel revenge.
Right.
What's the next step up in the emotional scale, so to speak, so that eventually I can get to my own joy without inflicting pain on other people.
Monica, you just reminded me that on Wednesday of this week, just a couple of days ago, I had an initial conversation with someone I had never met before. And it didn't go well because there was something going on with her. I still don't know what it is. But what I failed to do was sort of check in with her in a way that would have given me a better understanding of where she was at the start of that conversation. It was like a 20-minute conversation. And I know that things weren't going well because she sent me an email of apology afterwards, and I was able to respond to that. And does that stimulate any thinking for you about checking in not only with yourself, which I think is the starting point of your teaching, but also with the other person, because they may fail to do so. And so it's important for us to have, in order for us to have good communication, we need to check in with the other person as well.
Absolutely. And on different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Before I see a client, for example, for inner guidance communication, so someone's coming to me because they want to find the truth within themselves.
Right.
Or I'll use, if someone comes to me for body language, we'll use the same thing, but I'll start with inner guidance communication. So let's say you've set up an appointment with me. First, I connect with myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I make sure that I am firm in myself. This is before you and I even meet. And then I go in and I connect, might sound a little woo-woo, but I connect to your energy and your divine mind, I call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the question I ask before you and I meet is there anything in particular to bring up or make sure that we cover in our session together?
Mm-hmm.
So even before this interview, I knew we were doing this.
Yes.
I meditated and I asked, is there anything that my divine mind or consciousness wants me to make sure to bring up during the conversation? Anything at all? And the only answer I got was to make sure to remind people that no matter what they're doing, no matter what they're wanting, it's because they're trying to be happier.
Right. Right.
So that they can have more compassion for themselves.
Right. And compassion for others. So you've got to have both,
Yeah.
don't you? So
Yes.
this other individual who, it was a frustrating, brief conversation for me. I don't know if I clearly conveyed that this was a phone call, not a video conference. I hear from so many people that they get fatigued with Zoom, but I'm not so sure that is the way to think about it. I mean, I felt like I was at a disadvantage because I couldn't see this person. And
Yes.
during the course of this brief conversation, it was like she was doing housework with a dog barking in the background. And, it was almost like she was deliberately not paying attention. And all of that was frustrating to me, but it may be because she had nervous energy and she was trying to expend that energy during the course of the call.
Right.
Had we been on Zoom together, she would have been forced to pay attention. We would have connected. I could have seen if she was exhibiting nervous energy, and I might have been able to do something to help ameliorate that. But I felt disadvantaged because it was a phone conversation only.
Yes, nonverbal communication does come through on the phone, and you received a lot of it. So the question becomes, how can you speak to it? I mean, like you said, you felt afterwards as you reviewed it in your mind that maybe you could have said something early on, like even asking, it sounds like you might be distracted.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on in your life right now, or something like that.
Would you like to reschedule this call?
Mm,
Yes.
what a
And
great,
you're right, in person, I think that people get Zoom fatigue
right.
because,
You
why
have to
would it
pay
be?
attention.
You have to pay attention, and it's difficult if there are many people on the call. If it's
Yeah,
just you and me,
right,
not bad at all. I make your image large so that I can see you.
right,
And there are ways to connect. We'll talk about body language now.
right.
There are ways to connect on Zoom so that you feel more connected to people.
Hmm.
So one of the things is to make sure that your hands are visible. It sounds weird,
Mm,
but it really affects the subconscious mind. If I'm always talking like this,
hmm.
especially if there are many
You
people on the
you
call,
mean
you
like
don't
that?
even know who's talking.
Yeah,
Who's talking?
yeah, right.
Plus, there was this study done with jurors, in a courtroom,
Yes,
and they found that jurors assumed the defendants who had their hands under the table were
right.
sneaky, untrustworthy, and deceitful.
Ah, that's interesting.
The subconscious mind
Mm,
cannot relax and cannot trust you if it can't see your hands,
mm-hmm.
because my subconscious mind is back in the cave and I'm worried you're going to come in, hit me on the head, and steal my fire and my food.
Interesting.
And how do I know if I'm safe? If I can see your hands, I feel safer.
Right.
That's why if you feel like if the police come toward you, you go like this,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It's your automatic innate reaction that says, hey, you're safe. I don't have a weapon. It's okay. If you want to get your teacher's attention, you raise your hand. If you want to say hi to someone, you wave your hand. It's a natural thing to show your hands. But on video chat, we're so busy talking like this that we don't see people's hands.
Hmm.
So how do you see someone's hands?
Right.
First of all, if you're sitting like with
Right.
yourself really down here, even if I'm gesturing, you can't see my hands.
Right.
If I sit up, so the top of the screen is at the top of my head,
Hmm.
the bottom of the screen is at the bottom of my top of my ribs, bottom of my ribs. Then when I gesture, you can see my hands. And you will relax more
Mm.
if my hands are visible.
Okay, you're telling me I should adjust my camera.
Oh, look at you. Already that makes me sigh with relief.
Does it really?
Yeah, I can feel my body relax.
Interesting. You feel safer because you can see more of me. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Interesting.
That's
Well,
why when you meet in person, let's say
right,
I call someone into my office in person
right,
and I'm at a desk, maybe a wooden desk.
right,
I don't want them to sit across from me.
right.
That is called the reprimand position.
Hmm.
Conversations are shorter, people are less relaxed.
Right,
It's like being called into the principal's office because you were naughty, right?
right.
So if I want to connect with someone and we're in person in my office, I will call them in and I will sit on one corner and have them on another corner.
Hmm.
Because then as we face each other, they see my body and they will relax.
Right.
Yeah,
This is a big deal in business because regardless of the product or service that we sell, we have to earn trust and respect. And so these are ways that will contribute to our success if we adopt them, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
that it sounds to me that when you speak to business groups, that's your mission today.
That's right. And even when I coach students on interviews,
Mhm.
I think a while ago I did a one-on-one with a student that was trying to get into the top, not culinary, excuse me, hospitality school in the world, which is in Switzerland. And they have
Right,
a 5-step process to get in.
right.
And so one of the steps was to video themselves answering questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I was coaching her and she got frustrated. She says, Monica, I just want to be me. I just want to be let in because I'm me. I
Mm-hmm.
said, I want them to let you in because you're you as well.
Right.
But our first impressions when we see someone are non-verbal.
Right.
Before you say anything, I want you to get past that first 10 seconds
Right.
so that they can recognize your brilliance and see how wonderful you are.
Right.
But if your nonverbal first impression is negative, they won't even know that their subconscious mind has made an assumption,
Mm-hmm.
and they will judge you. Their subconscious mind will judge you. There was a study done in which they interviewed in-person interviews.
Yes.
They videotaped them. And then they took two groups of very experienced interviewers.
Mm-hmm.
Group A, they showed them the full 20-minute interview. And group B, they only showed them the first 10 to 20 seconds before the candidate said anything.
Mm-hmm.
Both groups chose the same people, implying that the first impression is the most important thing. It's not what people had said.
I think I mentioned to you that my son Patrick is a graphic artist, and I just love his work because he can take concepts that I create that are imperfect and not fully shaped, and then he makes it look professional. And to me, that's so fun and exciting. I mentioned earlier the author Donald Miller in his book about story branding. And in his book, Donald Miller talks about images that need to be used in the story branding as well. I'm about to make a change on my LinkedIn profile and website for that very reason. He talks about the importance of having smiling faces, in other words, satisfied customers. And so Patrick and I are in the process of working on that, but I'm sharing the books of Nancy Duarte and Donald Miller to him for this reason, because I think if we can take the written word and images and bring them together, and then the next step is your world, and that is the world of us, then, we've got our websites and we've got our profiles, but we've got to take it to the world as individuals. And that's what you're about, teaching us to do that piece of it. Did I say it correctly?
That is correct. And beyond that, it's teaching people how to be authentic when they present themselves on LinkedIn and websites.
That's a word we haven't used yet today, authenticity. Right?
Authenticity. Who are you, Monica? If my headshot, okay, is like this,
Right.
what does this say about me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving your subconscious mind says, wow, Monica is maybe closed-minded.
Right.
This is what this means.
Right.
I can't see her hands, so I can't trust her.
Right.
But rather than if I have an open pose, even just like this, you see my hands, I smile, look straight on.
Right.
If we see someone straight on, our subconscious mind assumes that you're more authentic and trustworthy.
Right.
So don't look out the side of your eyes, right? You also don't keep your eyes really wide. I saw an advertisement on LinkedIn yesterday for this woman, and she had the whites around her eyes showing. It could have just been the flash on the camera, but when your eyes are wide like that, it looks like fear. And my subconscious mind looked at her and went, made me feel afraid.
Right.
Because emotions are catchy. What happens is that my subconscious mind is always on alert because it's in the cave, words are going to come in and steal my fire and my food.
Right.
So my subconscious mind is always looking. And if I see someone's expression in which they appear fearful, it makes me fearful. Emotions attach that way.
You and I have never met in person before, but I happen to be 6'5". And when I was a younger man, without thinking about it, I think I tended to try to shrink myself for that very reason, that I didn't want to be intimidating to people. I wanted to make them feel comfortable. And so I would kind of slump my shoulders and do my best to shrink. And it was that, I think, that business of fear. In other words, I wanted to be approachable. I didn't want to be fearful. But now we're all the same height on video. And so now we've got different things to think about.
Yes. Well, isn't that wonderful that you were aware of that?
Yeah,
One of
later
my
in life,
clients is
actually.
also 6'5",
Mhm.
right? So when you're 6'5", if you're in person, you give people more space. And here I see the background you chose is a
Right.
conference room, right? So if I'm 5'3", I'm the opposite of you. I'm little, you're tall. When I would go into sales meetings in these conference rooms and the chairs could go up and down, I would put my chair as high as possible because I wanted to non-verbally be on the same level as other people.
Right.
And you, as a 6'5" person, in order to create equality and
Right.
openness in a room, would put your chair at the bottom.
I did.
So that, and so here, this is like being at a conference room table in which my chair is all the way up and yours is all the way down,
Mhm.
and we're more equal.
Mhm. Yeah, because we want to create equality.
Yes, and collaboration
Mhm.
and openness.
Those are great words. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and
And back to something else we mentioned just a moment ago. In order to create all those things, an atmosphere of safety needs to be around. And that's where the unconscious mind comes in. That's why there are all these workshops on bringing our unconscious biases up to consciousness, just to be aware of them.
so many people have spoken about and written about the fact that this past year has been an accelerator in our world. And I wondered if you've experienced that. I think there's been a tremendous silver lining in so many ways. Linings plural, I think I should say. That for me, the Zoom world and the ability to record these conversations is an absolute delight. And so, in what ways do you think it has been an accelerator in the work that you do?
In the work that I do, well,
In your world in general?
in my world in general, I would say that I believe that we all create our own experiences. We attract to us that which we've designed for ourselves.
Hmm.
And being that this is a global event, I've always said that everybody created this together. And if you created it, what is the silver lining for you? And if I created this for me, what is the silver lining in it for me?
Right.
And as people are being forced to isolate more, less able to distract themselves
Yes.
with movies and bars and get-togethers and all this, there's less distraction in the world and people are forced to face themselves. And it can be a very difficult process,
Yes.
very difficult process. Who am I in all of this?
Hmm.
And so my body language speaking events had been going. I had keynote addresses and workshops coming up, and lockdowns hit and everything got canceled.
Yes.
So what is my silver lining? My silver lining was, it's a reminder of what I'm really passionate about, is the individual and helping the individual connect to themselves and finding their own truth. And so that put me into doing, again, more of my inner guidance communication coaching. I still love doing body language coaching.
Right.
And I've done a number of events on Zoom, and it's just as easy to impart that information via Zoom as it is in person. So that has been wonderful. So those are my silver linings.
You have the world at your fingertips now, so you can do the same presentation in Delhi or Paris or Makati City in the Philippines, wherever the need
I
arises.
know.
Which leads me to another question. And I was in conversation with a CEO yesterday who runs a company here in the United States that is owned by a Norwegian company. And her concern was a desire to give traction to her organization so that they can drive and move forward, but with a concern for and a respect for the fact that there is a different culture and that she wants to be respectful of that culture, but yet drive the organization forward. And communication in all its forms is a factor here. So does that stimulate any thinking for you, Monica? Have you worked with people from other cultures? Canada.
I think I have become the go-to speaker for a pharmacy student association in Lebanon, of all
There
places.
you go. Yeah,
They found me, and I've done 3 or 4 presentations to all their students.
great.
The thing that strikes me is that some basic body language is very important.
Yes,
Interguided communication is crucial.
yes,
And in a business setting, when you're working with people of different cultures,
right.
there are different ways of communicating.
Mhm.
And I'm not an expert at that. There's a woman, her name is Barbara Bolt, Bolt, here in Michigan, and she is an expert in that. So, for example, one culture might, when they give feedback, they're just really blunt about it. In another culture, more like here, you give 2 positives, a negative, another positive to soften the blows.
Right.
That is not seen as very serious. Like, oh, they don't really mean it if you come from the culture that has a habit of just coming right out and saying things.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's understanding verbal communication as well. And other than inner guidance and nonverbal, that's not my specialty.
Mhm.
But I think that if she's working with the culture in Norway, it's figuring out how are they different.
Mhm.
My mother came over from Italy to marry my father. So my father was from the United States, and he had gotten a job in Winnipeg. And when he was traveling around Europe, someone had stolen his wallet, his passport, all his money, the
Wow.
day before he was supposed to come back to the States or Winnipeg.
Yes.
So he went into the Alitalia airline office in Milan to tell them that he didn't have his ticket, he didn't have his passport. This is 1959.
Yes.
And who was working at the counter? But Graziella Malagoni, my mother.
That's great.
So he had nowhere to go. He spent the day with her. He came back next year. They started to correspond, and then she moved to Canada to marry him. And they had three daughters.
Yeah.
So we used to spend summers in Italy when I was growing up, every other summer.
Wow.
And it really is a different culture, a different way of expressing yourself.
Yes.
And even when I talk about hand gestures, I try and keep my gestures here because with the Italian background, I
Right.
start to use really big gestures. So even just the way of relating a story is different in Italy compared to Canada, which is similar to the United States. Norway is different than Italy. Italy is different than France. France is different than Norway. So I think it's good to understand those. And what is the name of the book? I read a book on it. It was just fascinating. Barbara Bolt would know. So you could reach out to her on LinkedIn, or anybody that's watching this
Thank
could
you.
reach out.
Mhm.
Yeah, really fantastic.
Yeah.
Mm.
What questions have I not asked you? Some areas that you'd like to cover that I may have neglected?
Well, when I meditated and talked with my inner guidance, the emphasis was emphasizing happiness. So we did that.
Mhm.
Check.
Good. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because, in that failed conversation that I had earlier in the week, had I done so, had I prepared and used meditation as an effective tool, I would have been better prepared for that conversation, regardless of what she did. It starts with us as individuals, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
And when you understand that everything has to do with you, and I understand everything has to do with me,
Yes.
that if I'm on a phone conversation with you and you're busy and you hear the dogs in the background, you can hear, and I hear you shuffling papers and not paying attention, I know it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
That the person on the other side of the line, is trying to do whatever she can or he can to make themselves happy.
Right.
Maybe if I have all this stuff to do, if I don't get it done, I can't feel good about myself.
Hmm.
Or I have all these expectations, or, I can't believe I scheduled this phone conversation. A different time would have been better.
Right.
And that is an example to me.
Right.
Now, in the moment, the other person was not taking care of themselves.
Mm.
Taking care of, if I was in a such situation and I was truly taking care of myself, I would have said, John, this is just not a good time for me. Or I would have said, hold on, I'm going to put the dog in the room. I'm going to put away all these papers because I know that multitasking is not possible. And I'm going to honor myself and you by being fully present. So we're all doing the best we can. And the one thing my father used to say that still sticks with me is, your opinion is none of my business. So whatever someone else thinks is a reflection of how they feel about things and not a reflection of me.
Yeah.
So how do we stand firm in ourselves, hold on to our own joy and our own happiness without letting ourselves be dictated by the outside world?
You know, the takeaway, there are so many takeaways of this conversation today, but I think if there's one word that sticks with me, I'm not sure that we used it, but I would say is awareness, self-awareness, awareness of the other person. The popular word today is mindfulness, has become almost overused, but awareness is similar and related. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know if it's the same as mindfulness. Mindfulness to me is more focused on self.
Right.
To be fully present.
Yes.
Awareness, as you mentioned, is beyond that. It's awareness of myself and awareness of others and how we interact. Awareness that even as I speak with you, if I feel triggered by something you said, it has nothing to do with you.
Yes.
It has to do with me and my, hold on, I'm going to grab the word. Beliefs. Because it just means that I am believing something that's not true. How do we change our beliefs? First, they have to come up to consciousness. So if you say something and I feel triggered or angry about it, I can pause because I'm aware and say, wow, I felt angry about that. And what was that about? You know, it's some belief that someone should not say something to me, or I should be different, or whatever it may be. And then I can bring it up to consciousness, question that belief, and reprogram it. Because our thoughts are like computer code, right? So we have this computer code, which takes up all of my thoughts. And this computer code, some of it was written before I came into the body. Some of this computer code was put in by my family. Some of this computer code was put in by society. Some of this computer code was put in by my religion. Some of this computer code was put in by that first grade teacher, right? So as I go through life and I have a thought or a belief, and I say, wait a minute, is that computer code from society, from my first grade teacher, from my mother, from religion, or is it truly what's true for me? And when we believe our thoughts, especially those that are programmed by everybody else, that's when we feel angry, insufficient, unworthy, sad, despondent, instead of happy. So how do you find this programming? Say, oh, well, this piece, that's not true. That's not true for me. I'm going to reprogram that, which is reprogramming thoughts and beliefs, mindset training, saying that belief is not true. I'm going to delete that line of computer code that's in my head and replace it with new computer code. And that's the process, because the more you can delete lines of computer code put in by others, discover what's true for you and reprogram that in for yourself, the happier and happier you feel.
So you're asking us to pause, to reflect. We have an opportunity to make a change, to replace that computer code. Uh, that's easier said than done sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there needs to be a process for replacing that computer code, and that can be done in that might take several hours more than we have today, but
Yes, yes.
yeah. But then
But
but we have an opportunity to become a better person and more effective in the work that we do as a result of this process.
something else, when you're in a meeting, let's say I'm in a meeting with people, even one person, I'm at work, and I notice I'm triggered.
Mhm.
I can't really say, John, just give me 5 minutes while I meditate.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just not convenient.
Yeah,
Just when to be aware that you're feeling the feeling,
right,
know that that part of the brain that's back in the cave has taken over, and you can't think logically.
right,
I think it's for 35 seconds. So that part, the part of the brain that can respond logically is offline.
right.
So if you feel triggered, pause and just try and wait 35 seconds before you reply. Otherwise, you might reply in anger. You might lash out. You might start crying. It's just, how do you stay out of that for 35 seconds?
Yeah, that you made me think that metaphor of using computer code, and it made me wonder how much of it is from the exogenous forces that you described, from religion to upbringing to society, all of the things that happen to us in life, and what portion of it is, like, for lack of a better word, uh, biology or DNA or programming that is maybe hard coded. Is that a fair statement? Yeah, because then
I would say that even that, it's not hard, it's still
in our
software.
reptilian brain
It's
is
still
what I'm trying to
software.
say.
I think it's still software. We call it epigenetics.
Right.
Researchers have shown that um, Bruce Lipton talks a lot about us. He's a researcher. I think he was a medical doctor. He taught in medical schools, and then he realized that when we change our thoughts about things, the condition of the body changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That we are actually receivers. That consciousness is not even inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you receiving? What are you tuning your dial to? Am I
Mm-hmm.
tuning my dial to look at everything negative in the world? Am I tuning my dial to look at everything positive?
Mm-hmm.
I had this friend close by. We used to see each other often. And he'd tell me about his experiences during the day.
Right.
And I said, where do you live?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew we lived in the same city. His experience of the city was completely opposite to mine.
Right.
When you see the world a certain way, you will notice those things.
Right.
When I was pregnant the second time, I was determined not to have another hospital birth. Was not my favorite thing.
Right.
So we went to the midwife in Ontario, and she's checking my belly, and she says, so do you know when this baby was conceived? I said, I know the exact date this baby was conceived.
Mm-hmm.
She says, well, Monica, either your dates are wrong or there's more than one in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew my dates were right. And sure enough, I had twins.
Mm-hmm.
From that moment forward, I noticed twins. There were twins there. I'd meet people who were a twin or had twins, or someone else whose best friend were twins. It came into my awareness because it was such a shift in my mind and my reality
Yes.
that I noticed it everywhere. Now, did the world completely change around me? My perception of the world certainly changed.
Mm-hmm.
And even to this day, one of my sons started to date a young woman here in town. And after he'd been out with her a few times, he says, did you know she's actually a twin? What? So my twin is dating a twin.
Great. Well, thank you so much. You've been so generous with me, not just today, but in our prior conversations. I'm excited about you speaking to my group here in a week or two. And I can't thank you enough for your generosity, for heightening my awareness today on all of these important topics. So thank you for your time.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. I love sharing as much joy as I can. So if it shifted anybody's thoughts so that they feel happier today, I feel good.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.